They told her to keep walking, even after the chains cut into her skin, even after the girl behind her collapsed and never got up again. Because out here, in the endless heat, a human life meant less than the sand beneath their feet. She tried to remember her name, but every step erased a piece of it, until one terrifying truth remained. She wasn't being taken somewhere. She was being erased on the way there, and what waited for her at the end wasn't freedom. It was something people pray they never survive. This isn't fiction. This is the story they buried. The morning didn't feel important. That's what she would remember later. How ordinary it was. How quiet. How safe. The sun rose slowly over the dry land, painting everything in soft gold. The wind moved gently through the trees, carrying the smell of dust and warm earth. Somewhere in the distance a child laughed. She almost smiled. Her name was Amani, and in that moment, she still belonged to herself. She stepped outside her home barefoot, feeling the cool ground beneath her feet. Her mother was already awake, grinding grain with slow, steady rhythm. The sound was familiar, comforting. "Come eat," her mother said softly, without looking up. Amani sat beside her, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. There was nothing unusual, no warning, no sign that this day would be different from any other. That's how it always begins, not with fear, but with normal. Her younger brother ran past them, chasing something only he could see. He was laughing, loud, careless laughter that didn't know the world could change in a single moment. Amani watched him, and for a second, she felt something strange. A pause, like the air had shifted. She turned her head slightly, listened. Nothing, just wind, just morning, just life. So she ignored it, and that was the last time she would ever feel that kind of peace again. By midday, the heat had settled heavily over everything. The village slowed. Movements became smaller, quieter. Even the animals sought shade. Amani carried water from the well, balancing the weight carefully as she walked. Her thoughts were simple: what to cook, what to finish, what tomorrow might bring. Small thoughts, safe thoughts. Then a sound, distant, sharp, not natural. She stopped. So did the wind. Another sound, closer this time. Voices, not familiar ones. Her grip tightened around the container. "Amani," someone called from behind her. But she didn't turn. Something inside her knew. The third sound didn't leave room for doubt. Screaming, not playful, not loud, but broken, real. The kind that tears through the air and leaves silence behind it. She dropped the water. It spilled into the dust, disappearing almost instantly. For a second, she just stood there, frozen, because her mind refused to understand what her ears already had. Then the village moved, not calmly, not normally. People began running. Doors slammed. Voices rose all at once, confused, afraid, urgent. "Amani!" Her mother's voice again, this time sharper, louder. She turned, and that's when she saw them. Figures at the edge of the village. Not from here, not lost, not passing through, coming. Fast, purposefully, and suddenly everything made sense in the worst possible way. "Run!" The word came from everywhere, and nowhere. Her mother grabbed her arm, pulling her back toward the house. "Inside now!" Her brother was crying. Loud now, confused, terrified. Amani's heart slammed against her chest so hard it hurt. "What's happening?" She tried to ask, but her voice didn't come out right. It came out smaller, weaker, like it already knew it didn't matter. Her mother didn't answer, because she couldn't, because there was no answer that could fix what was already happening. Outside, the sounds grew louder, closer, feet, shouting, things breaking. The world was no longer slow and warm. It was fast, violent, unrecognizable. Her mother pushed her toward the back of the house. "Don't look back," she said. That was the last instruction she would ever give her. Amani ran, not because she understood, but because her body had already decided for her. Behind her, the village was no longer a place. It was noise, fear, endings. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to get away. Branches cut against her arms as she moved. Her breath came in sharp, uneven bursts. The ground beneath her feet felt unfamiliar, like it was pushing her away instead of holding her up. Then, a hand, rough, sudden, grabbing her from behind. She screamed. But the sound didn't travel far. It disappeared into the chaos, swallowed by everything else. "No, please!" Her words broke apart before they could become anything meaningful. The grip tightened, unmoving, unquestionable. She struggled, kicked, fought with everything she had, but it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. And in that moment, as the sky above her burned bright and indifferent, as the sounds of her home faded into something distant and unreachable, Imani understood something that would stay with her forever. This wasn't something she could escape. This wasn't a moment. This was the end of the life she knew, and the beginning of something she couldn't yet imagine. Something darker, something that didn't care about her name, her voice, or her past. The world didn't end that day, but hers did. She didn't remember when she stopped fighting, only that her strength left before her fear did. The ground scraped against her feet as she was dragged back, away from the trees, away from the path she thought might save her. Back toward the noise, back toward the end of everything she knew. Her breath came in broken pieces. Her hands clawed at the dirt, but the grip on her arm didn't loosen, not even once. By the time they reached the edge of the village, it was already unrecognizable. The place where she had woken up that morning, the place where her mother's voice had felt like safety, was gone. Not vanished, not empty, but changed into something violent and unfamiliar. Smoke lifted slowly into the sky. Doors hung open like unanswered questions, and the silence was worse than the noise had been, because now there was nothing left to fight against. They forced her forward, step by step, past the places she knew, past the well, past the tree where her brother used to play. She looked for him, just once, just one glimpse, but all she found was absence, and that absence screamed louder than anything else. There were others, women, girls, some older, some younger, all the same in one way, the same fear behind their eyes, the same question no one dared to ask out loud. Why us? No one answered, because no one could. Imani's wrists were bound tightly. The rope cut into her skin with every movement, a constant reminder that this wasn't temporary. This wasn't a mistake. This was happening. She tried to speak, to ask, to beg, but when she opened her mouth, nothing came out, not because she had no words, but because somewhere deep inside, she already understood they wouldn't matter. They didn't look at her like a person. That was the first thing she noticed. Not anger, not hatred, not even cruelty, just nothing. Like she wasn't someone. Like she was something, something that could be taken, moved, used, forgotten. And that realization got deeper than the rope around her wrists. The sun began to fall slowly behind them, but no one stopped. No one rested. The group moved as one, controlled, directed, unquestioned. Imani stumbled once. Her knees hit the ground hard. Pain shot through her body. For a second, she thought maybe this was it. Maybe if she didn't get up, it would end. But a sharp pull forced her back to her feet. Rough, unforgiving, final. There would be no stopping. Not for pain, not for exhaustion, not for anything. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time had already started to lose its meaning. The village was gone now, hidden behind distance, behind dust, behind something she knew she would never cross again. Imani turned her head slightly, just enough to look back. The horizon swallowed everything. There was no trace left, no sign that her life had ever existed there. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. Not hope, not strength, but something colder. A quiet understanding. No one was coming. Night approached without comfort. The heat faded, replaced by a chill that settled deep into her bones. The sky stretched wide above them, endless, uncaring. Stars began to appear. Sharp, distant, untouchable. She used to love the night sky, used to look at it and feel something bigger than herself. Now, it just felt far away, like everything else. A girl beside her began to cry. Soft at first, then louder, then uncontrollable. Imani turned her head. Their eyes met for a brief second, and in that look, there was everything. Fear, confusion, desperation. The girl tried to speak, but her voice broke apart into nothing. Imani wanted to say something back, anything. But again, silence. Because what words could exist here? What comfort could survive this? The line slowed, not stopped, just shifted. Someone ahead had fallen. Amani couldn't see clearly, only shapes, movements, then stillness. No one rushed to help, no one bent down, no one reacted the way humans should. The line simply adjusted, moved around, continued forward, like nothing had happened, like no one had been there at all. Amani stared at the ground where the figure had disappeared. Her chest tightened, her breathing slowed, and a single terrifying thought settled into her mind. If she fell, that would be it. Not rescue, not mercy, just gone, erased, like she had never existed. She straightened her posture slightly, forced her legs to move, forced herself to stay upright, not because she had hope, but because she now understood the rules. You keep moving, or you disappear. The night deepened, the silence grew heavier, and the world around her became something unrecognizable. No past, no future, just steps, one after another, endless, meaningless, inevitable. And somewhere deep inside her, Amani realized something that made her chest feel hollow. This wasn't a journey. This wasn't leading somewhere better. This wasn't even about reaching a place. This was about breaking them before they ever arrived. By the third day, the sun no longer felt like heat. It felt like pressure, constant, unforgiving, like something sitting on her chest, making every breath heavier than the last. Amani's lips had cracked. Her throat burned with every swallow. Even when there was nothing left to swallow, water came rarely, and when it did, it wasn't enough. It was never enough. The line kept moving, always moving. No one spoke anymore, not because they had accepted anything, but because their bodies were learning a new rule. Save energy. Survive the next step. Then the next. And maybe, just maybe, the one after that. Amani no longer looked around. Not much. Not like before. Because every time she did, she saw something she couldn't forget. And forgetting was becoming the only way to keep going. The girl beside her, the one who had cried the night before, was still there, but quieter now. Too quiet. Her eyes stayed fixed on the ground, like she was afraid that if she looked up, she might break completely. Amani wanted to ask her name, just a name, something human, something real. But the moment passed, and then another, and another, until it felt too late. The ground changed beneath their feet. Hard earth turned to sand, soft at first, then deeper, each step sinking slightly, stealing more strength than the last. Walking became slower, heavier, more painful, and the sun above them seemed to grow closer, brighter, sharper, like it was watching. Someone whispered behind her. Amani couldn't hear the words, only the sound. Dry, broken, desperate, then silence again. The kind that follows when someone realizes no one is listening. Hours blurred together. The sky didn't change fast enough. The ground didn't end. And the line didn't stop. It just stretched forward endlessly, like it had no beginning and no end. Amani stumbled again, her vision blurred at the edges, darkness creeping in not from night, but from inside her. She steadied herself, forced her eyes open, forced her body forward. Because now she knew falling wasn't rest, it was disappearance. They stopped, not fully, just enough to shift, to adjust, to continue. A container was passed. Water. Amani's chest tightened at the sight of it. Hope, small, fragile, dangerous, rose for a second. She waited, watched it move from one person to the next, each sip quick, measured, controlled. When it reached her, she lifted it with shaking hands. The water inside barely moved. So little, so precious. She brought it to her lips, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. The heat, the pain, the fear, all gone. Just that single drop of life. Then it was taken, gone again, like it had never been there. The girl beside her didn't get any. Amani noticed too late. The container had already moved on. The girl didn't react, didn't speak, didn't even look up. And somehow, that silence felt heavier than anything else. By the time the sun began to fall, something inside Amani had changed. Not broken, not gone, but altered. Her thoughts were no longer about escape. Not about home. Not even about tomorrow. They had become smaller, simpler, more dangerous. Stay standing. Keep moving. Don't fall. A sound broke the silence. Not loud, but sharp enough to cut through everything. A body hitting the sand. Amani didn't turn immediately. She didn't want to, but something made her look. The girl beside her, the quiet one, was on the ground. Still, too still. Amani's heart stopped. For a second, she almost reached down, almost broke the only rule she had left. But before she could move, the line shifted. Again, around her, over her, past her, like she was already gone. Amani's hand froze in the air. Then slowly, it fell back to her side. Her chest felt hollow, empty, but her legs kept moving. Because they had to. Because stopping meant joining her. Because that was the rule now. Night came again. Cold. Silent. Endless. Amani didn't look at the stars this time. She kept her eyes forward. Focused. Empty. Because she understood something now. Something deeper than fear. Something colder than pain. Out here, you don't survive by being strong. You survive by becoming less human with every step. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the darkness, beyond the horizon they couldn't yet see, something waited. Not freedom, not safety, but the next stage of what this journey was always meant to become. By the fourth day, no one remembered how long they had been walking. Time didn't move forward anymore. It just stretched endlessly, like the desert itself. The sun rose again, but it didn't feel new. It felt repeated, like the same day had been forced to begin all over again, without permission, without mercy. Amani no longer felt her feet, not fully, just a dull pressure where pain used to be. Her body had stopped complaining, not because it wasn't hurting, but because it had learned no one was listening. The line moved slower now, not by choice, by loss. Every step took more effort. Every breath felt thinner, and the silence had changed. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was emptiness. A woman ahead began to whisper. At first it sounded like prayer. Soft, rhythmic, almost peaceful. Amani listened without meaning to. The words didn't matter, only the sound. It felt human, something she hadn't felt in a long time. But then the whisper changed. It broke, turned into laughter. Dry, uneven, wrong. Amani's eyes lifted slightly. The woman was still walking, but her head tilted strangely, her lips moving faster now, her voice rising. Not in hope, not in faith, but in something else, something that didn't belong here. The line didn't stop. No one reacted, not even when the woman began to laugh louder, not even when her steps became uneven, not even when she fell. This time, it wasn't quick. She didn't go still. She moved, twisted, tried to push herself back up, her hands digging into the sand, pulling, shaking, fighting something no one else could see. Amani's chest tightened. Her body leaned forward slightly, not enough to break the line, just enough to feel it, to almost do something. But again, no one stopped, no one helped. The line curved around her like water around a stone, uninterrupted, unchanged. The woman's voice faded behind them, not suddenly, slowly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. Amani faced forward again, but something inside her didn't follow. It stayed back there, with the sound, with the struggle, with the realization. This place didn't just take bodies, it took minds, slowly, quietly, until there was nothing left to hold on to. Her breathing became steady again, too steady. Her thoughts quieter, too quiet. And that's when she noticed it. Something far more dangerous than pain. She was getting used to this. The way no one spoke. The way no one helped. The way people disappeared. And the world didn't change. Amani swallowed slowly. Her throat still burned. But the feeling inside her chest, that sharp human reaction, was fading, replacing itself with something colder, something easier, something that didn't hurt as much. Acceptance, not of what was happening, but of what was no longer possible. She tried to remember her mother's voice. Just the sound, just the tone, but it came out distant, faded, like it belonged to someone else's life. She tried to remember her brother's laughter, but even that felt weaker now, further away, like the desert was taking those too. One memory at a time. Amani closed her eyes for a second. Just one. Too long. Her body dipped forward. A sudden jolt pulled her back, a rough force keeping her upright. Her eyes snapped open, breath sharp, heart racing again. Not from fear, from instinct. Stay awake. Stay moving. Stay here. Because now she understood something even worse than before. It wasn't enough to survive the journey. You had to survive yourself. The sun began to fall again, but this time something appeared in the distance. Faint, unclear. At first, it looked like a trick of the heat, a shimmer, a distortion. But as they moved closer, it held its shape. Dark lines, still forms, something man-made. The line didn't react, didn't speed up, didn't slow down, but something in the air shifted. Not hope, not relief, something heavier. Amani stared at it, her eyes narrowing slightly, trying to understand, trying not to, because deep inside, without anyone telling her, without anyone explaining, she already knew the journey wasn't ending. It was arriving. The structure didn't look like a place at first. It looked like a wound in the land, something forced into the desert rather than built upon it. Dark shapes rose from the sand in uneven lines, walls, enclosures, and gates that seemed too heavy for the silence around them. No sound came from it, not even wind, as if the air itself refused to enter. Amani slowed without realizing it, just slightly, just enough to feel it more clearly. The others didn't stop. They never stopped. So she moved again, step by step, closer. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the ground. The structure swallowed that light without reflection. No warmth returned, only shadow, only weight. At the entrance, the line broke formation for the first time, not into freedom, into control. Hands signaled, not words, not explanations, just gestures. Sharp, efficient, final. The group was divided, not spoken, not discussed, just separated, like objects being sorted. Amani felt a pull at her arm again, different this time, not toward forward, but sideways. She resisted instinctively, not strongly, not loudly, just enough to remember she still could. But resistance meant nothing here. It never had. She was moved into a narrower path, walls rising on both sides now, close enough that she could touch them if she stretched her fingers. But she didn't. Something told her not to. The air changed inside, cooler, still, heavy in a different way, not heat anymore. Presence. Voices existed here, but they were not loud. They were controlled, measured, stripped of emotion, like they had been practiced into silence. Amani was brought into a wide-open space. The ground was flat, too flat. The kind of place that didn't belong to nature, only to intention. Other people stood there, not in groups, not in comfort, just positioned, waiting, eyes forward, faces unreadable. She tried to understand what she was seeing, but understanding felt dangerous now. Every time she tried to name something, it became more real. And reality here was heavy. Someone stepped forward, not suddenly, not dramatically, just present. Like they had always been there, but only now decided to be seen. They didn't speak loudly. They didn't need to. The space itself made everything clear. More movements followed, assignments, directions. The group shifted again, not as people, as categories, as placements, as roles being assigned without consent. Amani's name was never asked, never spoken, but her position changed. That was enough. She was taken toward a side structure. Smaller, darker, contained. Her steps slowed again. This time not from exhaustion, from awareness. Something in her chest tightened. Not fear exactly. Something sharper. Something that didn't have a name yet. Inside the structure, the light faded almost completely. Only thin lines of brightness came through narrow gaps. Enough to see. Not enough to feel safe. Amani was placed with others. Women. Girls. Some sitting, some standing, all quiet. All watching the same thing. Nothing in particular. Everything at once. No one spoke to her. Not because they were cruel, but because speech felt like a memory no one trusted anymore. Amani lowered herself slowly to the ground. Her body obeyed without question, like it had stopped asking permission from her mind. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. The concept didn't matter anymore. Only stillness. Only waiting. Then a sound outside. Different from before. Not chaos. Not panic. But order. The atmosphere changed immediately. Not loudly, but deeply. Like pressure shifting underwater. Amani looked up slightly. The others did too. Not in hope. In recognition. Something was about to begin. Not arrival. Not rescue. Not end. A continuation. And in that moment, Amani understood the most important truth yet. The journey hadn't been taking them somewhere. It had been preparing them for what came next. Every second now felt separated from the next, like time was breaking apart. The figure stopped in front of her, long enough to register her presence. No expression changed. No emotion appeared. Just observation. Amani looked down instinctively. Not submission. Survival. A learned reflex forming without permission. A gesture followed. Simple. Controlled. Final. She was moved, not dragged, not forced violently, just redirected, as if her direction had already been decided long before she arrived. The path she was taken through was narrower, quieter, more contained. Others followed behind her. Some she recognized, some she didn't, all of them now part of the same silent current. They entered a larger enclosed space, not empty, not full, but arranged, structured, intentional. Amani stopped at the edge of a marked line on the ground. Others did the same around her, rows forming without instruction, like the body already knew the pattern. No one explained anything. No one needed to. Understanding was not given here. It was assumed. A long pause followed. Too long to feel accidental. Too precise to feel random. Amani's thoughts drifted briefly. To her home. To morning light. To a voice that once called her name without hesitation. But the memory felt distant now. Not gone, just separated, like it belonged to someone she used to be. A sound broke the stillness. Not loud, but final in tone. The figures outside shifted again, and the system moved forward. Amani realized something in that moment. This place didn't break people quickly. It didn't need to. It changed them slowly enough that they stopped noticing when they were no longer the same. And as she stood there, waiting for whatever came next, she understood the most dangerous truth yet. She wasn't being taken apart all at once. She was being rewritten, step by step, without permission, without escape. The days inside that place stopped feeling like days. There was no sun to track, no night to mark endings, only shifts in silence and movement. Amani learned quickly that time here didn't pass. It repeated. Routines, patterns, commands without words, everything designed to remove hesitation from the body. She no longer asked what would happen next. That question stopped working. Instead, she learned something else. What is expected right now? That was safer. That was easier. That kept you moving. Her name was spoken once. Not kindly, not cruelly, just recorded. Like it had no weight beyond identification. Amani, short, flat, stripped of everything she used to attach to it. She didn't respond the way she used to. Something inside her hesitated now before reacting, not because she didn't understand, but because understanding had consequences here. The girl she had noticed earlier during the journey was gone, not mentioned, not explained, just absent. And the absence was treated as normal. That was the rule here. Nothing is questioned long enough to become real. Amani began noticing small changes in herself. At first, she resisted them. Then she simply observed them. And later, she stopped labeling them as changes at all. She no longer startled easily, no longer reacted quickly. Her body began moving a fraction slower than her thoughts, as if it was learning to disconnect from urgency. One morning, or what felt like morning, she was placed into another line. Different from before, shorter, quieter, more controlled. No one spoke as they moved. Even eye contact felt reduced. Not forbidden, just unnecessary. Amani realized something unsettling. People here weren't just afraid. They were conserving themselves. Like emotion itself had a cost. They were led into a structured open area. The ground marked again, divided again, arranged again. But this time, there was no guessing. There was understanding. Not spoken, but shared. Amani felt it before anything happened. That pressure in the air, that stillness that wasn't natural. That pause before something irreversible. A figure stepped forward, the same presence as before, calm, unchanging, observing, and then the process began again. But now Amani could see it differently, not as chaos, not as cruelty, but as system, movement, separation, adjustment, repositioning. People reacted less each time, not because it hurt less, but because reacting no longer changed anything. Amani's turn came again. She was guided forward, her steps steady, her breathing controlled, not calm, not brave, just contained. She stood where she was directed, waiting, not resisting, not accepting, just existing in the space assigned to her. A pause followed, long enough to feel intentional, long enough for thought to rise, then settle, then disappear again. And in that pause, Amani felt something she hadn't felt since the journey began. Not hope, not fear, not even despair. Recognition. She was adapting, not surviving in the way she once imagined, but changing in ways she didn't fully control anymore. The system wasn't forcing her to break. It was teaching her to continue without breaking loudly. And that realization was more dangerous than pain, because pain meant you were still whole enough to feel it. But this was something quieter, something deeper, something that didn't announce itself as loss. As she was guided back into position, Amani understood the direction this was taking. Not in detail, not fully, but enough to know one thing. This place didn't end people. It reshaped them until they no longer recognized themselves. And somewhere deep inside her, a question formed. Small, uncertain, still alive. If I stop reacting, what part of me is left? It happened without warning. Not loudly, not dramatically, but wrong enough for Amani to notice it instantly. A shift in the pattern, a pause that didn't belong, a silence that felt different from the others. People stopped moving for a fraction longer than usual, not ordered, not explained, just held. Amani felt it in her chest first. That old instinct, the one she thought had been fading, the one that used to warn her before she understood why. Something was changing. A new group was brought in, but not like before. Not quiet, not broken down by time. They were recent, fresh. Their fear was still visible, still active, still loud in their eyes. And that changed everything. Because, for the first time since Amani arrived, she saw herself reflected, not who she had become, but who she had been. One of the new arrivals stumbled, just slightly, a small mistake, but it was enough to trigger reaction, immediate correction, sharp movement, firm control. Amani's body tensed instinctively, not because she was next, but because she remembered what it felt like to be that person. The girl was brought into line, quickly, efficiently, and then positioned, like all the others. But something didn't settle this time. Not inside Amani. Not anymore, because she saw it now. Clearly, the process wasn't just breaking people. It was normalizing the breaking, making it routine enough that no one questioned it, including her. And that realization didn't bring fear. It brought something sharper. Awareness. Amani's eyes shifted slightly. Not defiant, not obvious, just awake. She began to notice details she had ignored before. The timing between movements, the repetition of gestures, the predictability hidden inside control. This wasn't chaos. It wasn't randomness. It was structure, and structures could be studied. A voice echoed briefly outside. Short command, then silence. But this time Amani didn't just hear it. She listened, not as someone inside it, but as someone observing it. And for the first time since her capture, her mind stepped slightly outside the system, not physically, but internally, just enough to see it differently. A small mistake happened nearby. A guard's attention shifted for a fraction too long. Just a moment, almost nothing. But Amani saw it, and in that moment, something long buried inside her shifted. Not hope, not escape, not even resistance yet, but possibility. Because systems, no matter how strong, always had rhythm. And anything with rhythm could be understood. She lowered her gaze again. Careful, controlled. But her thoughts didn't return to silence. Not completely. Not anymore. For the first time. She wasn't only surviving the system. She was starting to see it. And seeing it meant it could one day be broken. even if that day was far away, even if she didn't know how, even if she wasn't ready. Something inside Amani had already changed direction, quietly, irreversibly, and the system hadn't noticed yet. The change didn't happen all at once. It never did. It started as a thought she didn't ignore, then a second thought that stayed longer than it should have, then something closer to decision. Amani began watching differently, not openly, not dangerously, but precisely. She stopped seeing the space as a whole and started seeing it in parts. Movement patterns, pauses, repeating gestures, blind spots in attention, moments where control slightly loosened before tightening again. It wasn't escape she was thinking about. Not yet. It was understanding what control depended on, because nothing stayed perfect forever. Even systems like this, especially systems like this. Days passed in that same controlled rhythm, but Amani was no longer fully inside it. She moved through it differently now. Not resisting, not submitting, observing. The smallest detail changed everything for her now. A glance that lasted too long, a guard's shifting weight, a routine repeated without variation. And then it happened, a moment, small enough to be invisible to most, but not to her anymore. A path opened where it usually didn't, just briefly, just imperfectly, and Amani saw it. Her body reacted before her fear did, a single step out of alignment. Not escape, not rebellion, just deviation. Instantly, she felt it, the system noticing, not loudly, not violently, but immediately. The air changed, attention shifted, not fully, but enough. A presence turned toward her direction, not accusing, not emotional, just observing, correcting. Amani stopped moving, not frozen in panic, but controlled, contained, still. Something inside her had stopped accepting everything as final, and that alone was already a form of resistance. Somewhere beyond the walls, the system continued unchanged, unaware, unbothered, but inside it now, Amani no longer belonged to it completely, and that was where all changes begin, quietly, before they are ever seen. She corrected her position slowly, back into place, back into pattern, back into what was expected. No one spoke. No punishment came, but something had been recorded. She could feel it. That was the rule here. Nothing needed to be said for consequences to exist. That night, or what passed for night, Amani sat in silence longer than usual, not thinking loudly, just processing. She had tested the edge, and the edge had responded, not with violence, but with awareness. She understood something now. The system didn't fear rebellion. It prevented it before it fully formed. But prevention wasn't perfect. Nothing was. Her breathing slowed, not from exhaustion, from focus. For the first time, she wasn't just reacting to the world around her. She was beginning to read it, and reading it meant something dangerous was now possible. Choice, not freedom, not yet, but the idea of direction. Amani looked down at her hands. They didn't feel different, but she did. The system didn't collapse. It didn't explode. It didn't suddenly reveal its secrets. It simply continued, as it always had, as it always would. But something inside it had changed. Something small enough to be ignored, but real enough to matter. Amani stood in line that morning like she had every other morning. Same position, same silence, same controlled movements around her. But she was no longer the same, not completely, not fully inside it anymore. Her eyes no longer followed blindly. They observed, measured, remembered. She had learned its rhythm, and once you learn rhythm, you are never fully lost inside it again. The day moved forward like all the others. Commands given without emotion, people shifting without question, time dissolving into routine. But Amani noticed something now she never saw before. Not everything here was unbreakable. Some parts were just repeated often enough to look permanent. A small pause happened near the edge of movement. A gap. Barely visible. Almost nothing. But she saw it. And this time, she didn't just notice it. She remembered it. Not acted. Not yet. But stored. Like a map forming slowly in her mind. Later, as the light faded again, Amani stood still for a moment longer than required. Just one breath longer. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. But inside her, something had settled. She was still there, still inside it, still part of the system, but no longer owned by it. Not fully, not completely, because awareness had entered her, and awareness does not disappear easily. That night she looked up at the sky through a narrow opening. The stars were distant, cold, unmoved by anything below them, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel erased by them. She felt small, yes, but not gone, and that difference mattered more than anything else. Amani closed her eyes briefly, not in surrender, but in memory. She remembered who she was before this. And more importantly, she realized she was still someone after it. Not the same, not untouched, but still existing, still aware, still here. The system continued around her, unchanged, unaware of what it had already begun. But inside it, a quiet truth had formed. Even in places built to erase people, something always survives. Not always the body, not always the voice, but sometimes the mind. And once the mind survives, nothing stays final forever.